Now, the work of political commentators and social media influencers is to feel the pulse of the times, swaying public opinion on certain issues. And that's especially true of my next guest, whose opinions, no matter how controversial they may be, have earned him a somewhat loyal following, you could say. He has leaned pro-government in recent times, hailing the Tinubu administration for its policies and criticizing the opposition. I'm joined now by the political commentator, author, and social media influencer, Reno Omokri, who has strong opinions on everything from Senator Natasha Duangan, former governorship candidate Dino Melaye, and of course, the developments in Rivers State with the lifting of the emergency rule. Well, that's it. Oh, glad to have you join me, Reno Omokri.
Thank you, indeed.
Well, you're not dressed traditionally today. You're wearing a suit for a change.
Everything I'm wearing is made out of Ashaoke, with made in Nigeria Ashaoke from Ifeanyi. From head to toe, my shoes are actually made in Nigeria. They're crafted in Lagos. This is from Nigeria. Not a single thing on my body is not made in Nigeria.
Okay, promoting the Nigeria brand.
Yep.
That's interesting. Well, where do we start? Let's start with the issue of Senator Natasha Duangan. The chairman of NBA is asking the Senate to let the senator resume because she has served her 6-month suspension, and subsisting court case should not be an issue stopping her. What do you think?
Well, let's look at precedent. It's not what I think. We look at precedent. Why do we have off-season elections in Anambra State, in Ekiti State, in Osun State? For example, in Nigeria, we have elections between February and March every 4 years. So the next one is due 2027. But we're having an election in Anambra State, November 8. We're having an election in Ekiti State, July next year, 2026. We're having an election in Osun State, August. It's because in those states, you had people who went to court. And when they went to court, the clock stopped ticking in those states. And when the clock stopped ticking, by the time they got into office, that's when the INEC was now empowered by the courts to set elections. So when you go to court, the clock stops ticking. Natasha Akpoti was given an opportunity by the Senate to apologize and then get the suspension lifted. She didn't take it. She acted probably, in her own best interest. But by the time she went to court, don't forget, she went to court, the clock stopped ticking. Now, if she's dissatisfied with what has happened, maybe she could go back to court because, I don't know if you're aware of this, because she's also accused me of the same thing that she's accused the Senate president.
I've read about that. I've heard about that.
And eventually I was settled out of court because she lied. I was able to demonstrate. She said I made sexual advances against her on May 6, 2014, during a state banquet by President Jonathan for President Uhuru Kenyatta. And I was able to prove with a first-class British Airways ticket that I was out of the country. I had been sent by President Jonathan to the State Department in the US. I showed my passport stamps. And then afterwards, I was settled out of court. So she has a pattern of dishonesty. Look at what happened at the IPU. At the IPU, even till today, a lot of Nigerians think that she was invited there. She was a representative. The seat where she sat was actually the seat for Honorable Kafilat. Honorable Kafilat had gotten up. I think she was probably called to the high table. And she went there and sat on that seat and then made that statement that demarketed Nigeria. So there is a pattern of dishonesty here. Now, I don't know what happened between her and the Senate president. I wasn't there. But because the best predictor of future events is past events, by her record of reckless dishonesty, it's very hard to believe anything she said.
It's looking to me, frankly, I don't know how you will respond, like this is a vendetta, because we are not, you could prove me wrong, but the point here is the Senate said, go on suspension for 6 months. The NBA should know what the Constitution says. She served it out. The clerk wrote her and said, sorry, you can't come back because there's a subsisting court case. But the NBA is saying that should not stop her from returning. Mind you, she has a section of the society she's representing. The court said the suspension is excessive, not an order for Senate to recall her. But the point that is being made here is that she served her suspension. That's what you call status barred. Whether she apologized or not is not the question. We're not talking about her and the Senate president, mind you. We're talking about the Senate rules and the fact she was giving a punishment, she served it out, so she should naturally get back.
Well, listen, I've got a master's in law from England. I worked as a temp even at the British Parliament. In the British Parliament, parliamentarians are suspended. In Congress in the United States, congressmen are suspended. That's not the issue. The NBA is not a court. The NBA is a professional body. You have courts, judiciary. The other guy who said there's no judiciary in Nigeria.
No, but they're lawyers.
Yeah, they're
so
lawyers.
They should know.
Listen,
the Constitution.
They're lawyers, and then they have a president who is elected, and he has his opinion. There are other members of the NBA who will disagree. But the point is that we're not going with opinions of anybody, we're going with precedent. The thing is, when you go to court, the clock stops ticking, and I just proved that. That's why we.
So let me ask you now, because I have had to discuss this issue. Just supposing, let's suppose that, you know, sometimes courts delay. Supposing this is 2025, just supposing that this drags in court till 2027. What happens? She stays off the Senate?
Well, that is for the court to decide. You and I here, Ndi, we cannot begin to talk about matters that are sub judice. We can give opinions, but this is a matter before the court. So we have to allow the court, because we are a society governed by law and order. These are things that she should have thought about before going to court. Don't forget, she went to court. And then, other than going to court against the Senate, she also went to court against even individuals in the Senate. She's in court with Senator Umar. She's in court.
I mean, that's just individual. We're talking about the Senate.
I'm talking about she's in court with the Senate.
Yeah.
I also said as an ancillary, she's also in court with other principal officers. She's made some very weighty allegations that she hasn't proven. But that's not the issue. The issue is that on this particular matter, she chose to go to court. So there's a principle in law called the eggshell principle. You take your victim as you find it. So she takes the situation as she finds it. She was the one who went to court.
Okay, so for you, the Senate is right.
Well, not for me. I'm going by the precedent that has been set in Nigeria and in other common law countries. Okay. I'm governed not by my emotions. I'm governed by what the law says, the precedent.
All right, well, let's talk about the question of just yesterday. Today, Fubara is supposed to resume work. The president lifted that suspension. But there's been so many arguments here and there. Like you listened to Anas, he said it was what the president did was unconstitutional. In fact, I had a program yesterday where I enumerated the points that Section 305 could allow the president, you know, to suspend a sitting governor. Mind you, in 2013, the Attorney General then told the president, then, Jonathan, you can't do it. He did in Yobe and 2 other states. Emergency, but without suspending the governor. What do you think about, I mean, what has transpired and the fact that, well, Fubara has been, the suspension has been lifted, is supposed to resume office?
Well, in law, there's something called locus. You know, in plural, it's loci. Now, this man that's talking, me, you, we are individuals. We don't have sufficient loci. The governor himself, Sim Fubara, has praised the president, has visited the president during this state of emergency, has said that the president did the right thing. So you and I and that fellow, we cannot be...
No, he's saying that you can understand.
Yeah, but if you
what
let
do
me
you
land,
expect him to say?
If you let me land, well, I mean...
Go on.
So you and I, we cannot, be crying more than the bereaved. We cannot be more Catholic than the Pope. This is the main persona involved. And he said, I'm fine with it. The president did the right thing. The president saved Rivers State. So if the man who is involved, the main dramatic persona, is saying that, then probably people like the fellow and you and I should just allow the sleeping dogs lie. I listened to him when he was saying that the president cannot remove a sitting governor. The president did not remove Simi Fubara. He was suspended. And this is not the first time that a governor has not been suspended in Nigeria. It's not even the second time. The reason why we're having elections, obstinate elections in particular in Ekiti State, is because they once had a governor that was suspended and a sole administrator put in place. Listen, we need to look at precedent. Precedent takes preeminence over opinions.
I gave you one.
Yeah, which one is?
Jonathan.
Yeah, so in that
2013.
case, in that case, let me land, please. In that case, that was an opinion by the then Attorney General. So the Attorney General is like you and I. He's not a court of law, so he can give opinions. So let me tell you, what an Attorney General is at any point in time is a legal advisor to a president to give him opinions. So here's the thing, when you go to court, that's why they don't call it court opinions, they call them court judgments. And then in the case that I cited earlier, these individuals, some of them went to court and we've got court judgments. So until those judgments are overruled, then we have to say that what the president did is right.
There's the 11 PDP governors, if you remember, took the president to court. And some are of the opinion that the courts just kept mute. There was no decision on that. They were arguing the case of appointing an administrator was unconstitutional, suspending an elected governor was also unconstitutional. What do you make of the fact that the Senate just kept mute? That matter wasn't treated. I was talking to a senior advocate of Nigeria yesterday, and he said the courts kind of contributed to what we're witnessing in Rivers State.
Well, I think that the people that contributed to what we're witnessing in River State, have been mentioned. The House of Assembly was divided. We're having conflicting, emotions. And then, the executive, they had their own challenge. Don't forget, the reason why the Third Republic collapsed and why we had Sani Abacha is because of what happened, just like in River State, where you had courts giving, conflicting judgments. And that's how Sani Abacha took advantage of the situation and came in. Like I said, I am governed by precedent. I've trained myself because of my legal training not to be swayed by emotions. Let's look at the president. What the president did, he had precedent for. The governor accepted it. The governor praised the president. You and I cannot cry more than the bereaved.
Yeah, Reno, the point here, I will soon bring up the issue of, we'll also discuss the issue of the government saying they've achieved their revenue target, but Dino was here and said if you've achieved your, in fact, that's the commentary, why are you still borrowing? But before I said that, presidents can be deceitful in that in the long run, if you set a wrong precedent, it becomes a challenge for our democracy like we have today. What do you make of that?
Well, I went to a military school for secondary school. I went to a purely military school, I had military training, and one of the things that they taught us in the military school is obey before complain. So when you have a precedent, you obey it, and then you go back to the institution.
We're talking about democracy.
Can I finish? You go back to the institution that set that precedent, which is the judiciary, and then you overturn it. And then that's how a society is governed by law and order. It's not just here. It happens in the United Kingdom. It happens in the United States. If you just go willy-nilly saying, I don't like this precedent, look, society is going to be very, very destabilized.
I think you're correct. When a court issues a judgment, if there's no injunction, you obey, then you take it to court, and then maybe they could. Now, Dino Melaye said, well, let me start from the premise that the president said they've achieved their revenue target. Mm-hmm. And people have questioned that, really, from non-oil things, he's actually, but then
no sector.
No sector, thank you. But then some are questioning this administration and questioning that statement. Dino is one of them. He said the president committed a monumental, before I go to that, let me say, he said the president committed a monumental error that without even getting into the office, he removed subsidy without planning, without sedatives, like you give people when you want to, like when I removed my teeth, they had to give me a sedative. It had to die. I didn't know they were taking it out. That's why Nigeria is where it is today. Nigerians are happy and there's hunger in the land. That's what Dino said. And of course, he talked about the borrowing. If you've achieved your revenue target, why are you still borrowing?
Okay, well, I'm here today, right, with documents from the Debt Management Office. And Nigerians who are watching me, they can go to dmo.gov.ng and they can verify by themselves. You can actually do that. I see that laptop is enabled with the internet. When President Jonathan handed over to General Buhari on May 29, 2015, this is how much Nigeria was owing: $63 billion. $63 billion. I don't know if your camera can capture it. It's right there. $63 billion. Now, go on. When General Buhari was handing over to President Bola Tinubu on May 29, 2023, This is how much Nigeria was owing. Doubled. It went from 63 billion to 113 billion. As I'm talking to you today, right now, and people at home can fact check me. They can go on the internet and then go on Google and say, how much is Nigeria's total debt? Our total debt is now 149 trillion naira, which when you put it in dollar terms is $97 billion. So our debt under President Tinubu has actually reduced. It's a function of ignorance to come here.
No, you're talking about debt. We're talking about the fact that it's borrowing. For example, the government wants to borrow $1.75 billion in loans expected to be approved by the World Bank before the end of this year. Also, the House of Reps has approved President Bola Tinubu's request for an additional $347 million loan under the federal government's 2025-26 external borrowing plan. The Senate also is approving President Tinubu's $21 billion external borrowing plan. Why are we borrowing so if you've met your revenue target?
Let me explain
borrowing.
that. Now, if you give me time and don't interject, I'll explain that.
Yeah.
What the Senate approved is a medium-term expenditure framework. A medium-term expenditure framework is like a line of credit from a bank. So, for example, maybe your bank gives you a line of credit for about $1 million. You don't necessarily take $1 million. You can draw $50,000. You can draw $100,000. So, in 2013, President Jonathan had an MTEF where the total borrowing plan was $25 billion. I was a spokesman in that administration. President Jonathan did not borrow up to 25% of that. In 2020, General Buhari had an MTEF of $28.2 billion. He didn't borrow up to 40% of that. The MTEF is not a figure for the federal government. It's a conglomeration of all of the states, the 36 states, and the federal government, their borrowing plan. And it is not money that they will borrow. It's money that they can borrow. Now, to put it in plain terms, Nigeria is borrowing, but Nigeria is also paying back loans. And we are paying
at a great cost.
Excuse me. We are paying back loans at a faster rate than we are taking loans. And then these loans that you're talking about, like the World Bank loans and then some of these other loans, these are loans that any government would be unwise not to take. Because I'll give you an example. The U.S. Federal Reserve Bank...
Before you give me the example, just add this because we don't have time. Economists, who should know, are warning that the rising loan pipeline could deepen fiscal pressures if not matched with stronger domestic revenue mobilization, which is where the problem is, and prudent expenditure management. Some have wondered why more loans when you say you have higher revenues, sort of double speaking, from the government. No,
that's not double speaking. You're talking about economists. These economists that you mentioned, these unnamed economists, is any of them better than a first-class Harvard graduate in economics, Dr. Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, my friend, who came to Nigeria and said that the president has stabilized the economy?
She had to rework that statement.
She didn't rework that statement. Please, let me land, please. And are any of them better than the governor of Anambra State, a former CBN governor, a first-class in economics from the University of Nigeria, who said the same thing? And look, listen, Nigeria's debt has reduced by 17 billion under this president. How is he able to do that? It's because of prudent management of resources. I'm going to give you a very good example. For the first time in, this is over a decade, Nigeria is now overshooting her OPEC quota. So we have an OPEC quota of 1.5 million barrels per day. We are doing 1.7 million barrels per day. Of course, but when we are having that, we're going to meet our revenue target. But it doesn't mean that when the World Bank gives you a loan of zero interest, that you're not going to take it, because the interest rate right now in the United States, it's because the Fed just reduced it, it's 4.25, and then you have a World Bank giving you a loan of zero to very little interest rate. Every government will take that loan. It doesn't mean that you have not met your revenue target.
Okay, we'll leave it there because that's where the crux of the matter is. If I have enough money in my pocket, why do I go? If I say I have enough money in my
that's
pocket,
because you are not. That's because you are not an economist. Right. I understand how you're thinking that way. If, for example,
we'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there. Okay.
We don't have all the time. Thank you so much. Author, social media influencer, Omokri. It's been interesting discussing this issue with you.
Thank you for having me, Indy. God bless you.
Bless you too. Well, that's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye and thank you for watching.